Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Sky coming on to talk to you about the grand shift of the Sun and Pluto we will be having from the sign of Capricorn into Aquarius on January 20th, 2024. In this video, I want to make space for a nice stream of consciousness about probably a lot of 2024, as we will of course be having Pluto in Aquarius from January 20th until September 1st, 2024, when it will retrograde back into Capricorn one final time from September 1st until November 19th of 2024. Where on November 20th, 2024, it will move back into Aquarius and no longer have any more retrograde cycles that take it back into Capricorn. So I want to give you guys some foresight in this video about what to expect basically with this entire year cycle still being a cusp year for Pluto. However, just barely, because it is only going to be about a month and 3 weeks that it even goes back into Capricorn at all. And of course, I will update you guys around that time of the year, what I'm thinking about that movement. However, I think that this is basically going to be really introducing us to the true form energy of Pluto in Aquarius. I don't think that we've quite met it yet. And it won't actually be, I think, until the 2025 year cycle that we get the full taste of what that is going to be like. But we will get some really potent foreshadowing this year from the, of course, January until September time period, and especially come around May and June of 2024, once we hit the fellow air sign of Gemini, that's going to really give us a lot of heads up about, okay, this is what we're dealing with, this is the way the collective consciousness is starting to change. But I think that I've got some foresight on that already for you guys. So, go ahead and hit the like button below if you're excited for Pluto in Aquarius. Do comment as well and tell me your thoughts on this transit. And yes, for the rest of January, I will be having a promotion on my Patreon page. You can still get free trials if you want to try that out. So check that out. That will be linked below. But yes, let's talk about the grand Aquarian shift of Sun and Pluto. As it relates to 2024, a story is ending, okay? There are a lot of really long-running stagnated momentums that are just closing. The book is closing, and we're already seeing this in January, as I feel that 2023 was more of a lull of a year. It was kind of dense, and it was slowly having us steer a very heavy kind of ship the other direction. And now a new direction in 2024 is in the sight, and we are kind of moving a new direction, but we might still be backtracking a little bit within a somewhat sequel feeling of an experience. But it's already starting to feel very new, so you would start to see that certain long-running momentums, long-running relationships that were status quo are starting to shift. The energy of Uranus, okay, which is the ruler of Aquarius, is starting to be imbued with the powerful, transformative energy of Pluto. So for the last 15 years, as we had Pluto in Capricorn, of course Pluto in the Saturn-ruled sign of Capricorn, it imbued a lot of that powerful, transformative Plutonian energy into the material, structural aspects of the Earth plane. So this looked like the banking system, this looked like government and politics. This looked like real estate, money, currency, status, reputation, material things were imbued with that Plutonian energy. What this led to, in some ways, was perhaps a reversion to feudalism, but of course in a quote-unquote modern sense. And we're going to be tested with that as Pluto starts to change into Aquarius. So there's going to perhaps be like a vying of like corporatism versus a neo-feudalist kind of energy, and that will very much be occupying the sort of global macro stance. Now, most of us here watching this video are individuals, obviously, and we are living our lives with that vying as a certain collective backdrop. But that collective backdrop is going to start shifting here. And especially in 2025, we will have a better idea of what that backdrop is. Now, individuals working during this 2024 cycle, starting to introduce themselves to the Pluto and Aquarius time, what we can know and take comfort in is that there is somewhat of a sequel shift, somewhat of a movement of paradigm here, and we're just not going to be absolutely certain on how this is turning out. So for those of us who are control freaks, or for those of us who need guarantees, insurance, things that make us feel as if we know from every angle the possibilities or potentials, well, that's not going to be here. Okay, there are going to be things that we don't know the answer to. There are also going to be outcomes and chain events and cause and effects that we couldn't anticipate, meaning that we might have certain ideas about macro events, we might have certain ideas about certain material structures, or ideas about what it means to be in this status or that status, coming from Pluto and Capricorn. And these ideas are going to perhaps be proven right or wrong, but most likely proven wrong because there's a quantum shift, not just a material shift. So this is not just like a change of ownership. This is not just a change in rulership or representation or economic interest. This is a real quantum shift, meaning that we can get really caught up on material changes. Like, okay, now that person is in power and that makes me happier. Or, okay, now that person is, in my life, or I now have this relationship, or I now have this business, or I now have this job. This is all still Pluto and Capricorn, and it's starting to get old and it's not really working anymore, as we start to see that regardless of which, social structure or social area that we're inhabiting, there's something that's shifting at a quantum level that is somewhat, what would I say, designifying the material stance, okay? What this means to me is that this period of time, to give you guys a really mundane, powerful message, 2024, especially like January to June, all right, like this first 5 or 6 months, this also goes in alignment with Saturn and Pisces. I talked about this in the Saturn and Pisces video, which I'll link below. It's good to get long-running elements of our lives in order and kind of placed aside. So Pluto in Capricorn has been great for turning it inside out, meaning, okay, creating a business from scratch and just really learning everything about being a business person, or renovating a property and focusing on every corner and every box that needs to be checked and turning that into something that is stabilizing for our lives. That has been one of the positive aspects of Pluto and Capricorn, is the capacity to create from nothing sometimes a stable, long-running structure. Now, Pluto and Aquarius, it doesn't favor this. So what you start to see with Pluto and Aquarius is you start to see people not caring anymore. It's kind of like the next generation inheriting generational wealth or property, and they have their own lives to live, and maybe they just sell it, or maybe it's like a burden to them, or they have like other things that they want to be pioneering. So the first thing that I'm seeing, Pluto and Aquarius, it's starting to like care less about the material, and it's starting to consider the material, especially like real tangible things, like real property or structures, as a burden, meaning that there's going to be a liquidation and a movement towards minimalism. But I don't necessarily feel like that's the right move, because we are in more of an inflationary time period, and I think that that's going to limit the true autonomy that most people have, as Pluto and Aquarius also is somewhat less autonomous than Pluto and Capricorn, because Pluto and Capricorn, through working with this material capacity, was able to give itself some degree of economic freedom. However, Pluto and Aquarius, it somewhat perhaps demeans that feeling, and it wants more of a community connection. So this is very much in alignment with what we're seeing with like mass protests, mass people movements. That's where a lot of the collective consciousness at a quantum level is finding a greater sense of stability, rather than certain ownership constructs. Now, I don't necessarily think that that is real. I think that that is somewhat of one of the, I mean, it's kind of chaotic neutral. It's not positive or negative because certainly there are things that need to be organized around. But a lot of people are kind of in a rush recklessly, people are kind of rushing recklessly with certain needs to get things off their plate or certain needs to bring about a new story in their lives, because people are kind of like afraid with Pluto and Aquarius of consistency. They're afraid of having a guarantee perhaps of what their ancestors had, or they kind of want to live right this second. There's kind of an energy, as we're especially on this cusp of Capricorn and Aquarius Pluto, alongside having Pisces, Saturn, and Neptune, where it's like, this is my last chance, or I've got a desperate feeling about having certain life experiences, or opposing something, or bringing about a certain legacy based on my action, not on where I am or what I hold, to be known in a certain way, or to just live out a certain element of my gut feeling or a certain element of my world perception. World perception with Pluto in Aquarius, this is like, I think, the absolute core of what Pluto in Aquarius at an energetic level represents. It's not about so much the physical material world and how to organize that as Pluto in Capricorn was. It's about the perception of these things, not about their real existence in the material plane. So what that means is people, at least quite a majority of people, they are acting based on the way that they perceive certain material constructs, but they're perhaps struggling to actually orient the material shape, location, or weight of these constructs. That is a very, I'm not going to say very, that's a somewhat complex distinction between philosophy or worldview, where it's like the previous Pluto and Capricorn would have been much better for orienting, okay, this house is this big, it has this length and width, it's worth this much, and it can do this or that, but it can't do that. Whereas the more Pluto and Aquarian perception would be like, okay, I have this idea about what I have or what my family has had, or I have these notions about the way that these physical matter things are, but I can't really actually work with it. It just has a certain like historical context for me, or it is more of an idea than it is real. So I hope that I'm able to articulate this properly. People are more mind-centric with Pluto and Aquarius, if that's even possible. Gosh, it feels like the last few years have been very mind-centric, but I would say that's because we were transitioning into Pluto and Aquarius for these last few years. People are a lot more mind-centric instead of being materialistic. And to what extent people are materialistic, it deals with the picture that they're painting in their mind of their context more than it deals with what is actually there. So it's like the story in the material circumstance versus the actual materiality of the circumstances. Does that make sense? Because this is a really big quantum shift, and what it means is that people are going to start getting very strict and very fixated, right? Fixed air Pluto, on a certain story telling itself, or a certain outcome, or a certain idea materializing. So people are going to stop caring so much about the buildings and the structures and the money and all of that stuff. They're going to start caring about the story that's happening in those buildings or alongside these resources. And there's going to be a lot of narrative generating and a lot of like history writing, okay, during Pluto and Aquarius that gets very like edgy, and a lot more resources going to these ideas and to these perception cores, as opposed to caring about certain ownership constructs. So I mean, there's an opportunity there for people who want to really increase their abundance here. It might be easier than you expect, because I think people's minds are going to focus more on stories taking place than on what the backdrop for those stories are, or the locations that they're happening, as there's a certain like globalizing in a different way than what we've seen over the last like century. Okay, meaning that the world is, I think, globalizing in more of a perception level and in more of a understanding of what's happening at a kind of like general universal sense, as compared to like areas, regions, or things that are happening in a more localized material sense. However, because things are globalizing so much at a mental level, it's creating conflict and causing perhaps then like a downscaling to like multipolarity. So this is kind of like very Plutonian, right? Where you have these polarities and you have these opposing ideas. But something important also to remember about this time period, so this 2024 period, okay, is that it's still locked in a transition state. Meaning that since Pluto will go back into Capricorn one more time, we're still not quite out of the woods. We're still focused on the material. And my best advice for that is really challenging yourself during this time, during this year, to set about some solid long-running structures that you can place aside and really detach from that 9 of Wands, 10 of Wands archetype, where you're working harder than you have to for any type of material turnout. There should be a feeling that we are getting things in order, that we're kind of commanding our resources, that we're not carrying the boulder up the hill alone, or that if we are, that there is an end in sight to that. That's very important for this particular movement of Pluto. Now, something really awesome that I'm feeling, and this is so new in 2024, is starting to bounce back. Okay, so people are kind of shedding off some of that heavy burden that Pluto and Capricorn in the late degrees would have indicated, or they are starting to make motions to make that possible within the next year. So I'm starting to see things which have deteriorated restoring. I'm starting to see people working together. I'm starting to see people from different groups actually coming together. And this is one of the super major positives about Pluto and Aquarius, where there's maybe like a reduction of division, and you're going to start seeing in real life, okay, some people that you might not have expected coming together. But it's not going to be in the same vein that we might see like division taking place in the media, or also like division taking place in high-level conflict zones. It's not going to be that, perhaps, that we're seeing just heal up immediately here. Because, of course, actually we see perhaps a increasing division. But in the blithering pea soup, okay, in real life, we might be seeing, oddly, like certain divisive constructs starting to melt away, and then people just like having to work together. And this could absolutely just be because of difficult economic situations, which might have, in idea kind of stoked division, but in real life is like really forcing people to work together, regardless of certain things that used to be a dividing construct. So that's great to see. Also, I'm seeing a shift to a more executive tone in the lives of most individuals. So we really need to hone and summon our selfhood and summon the ability to really hold authority over our own lives during this time. So this means not just assuaging to people who are control freaks in your life, not just giving up, not just surrendering your own capacity here. Because this axis is moving to the Leo-Aquarius axis, Pluto, it gives a lot more of a individualistic potential, whereas the Capricorn-Cancer axis of Pluto would have been like relying on the family to work together, relying on the ancestors, relying on certain money constructs or, again, material things to decide what we do. Now we can take a little bit more authority with this Pluto as well. I also think it's important to take stock of new capacity that we have and starting to value that over certain outworn problems. Again, placing aside certain impossible feeling outworn problems feels important. And there's a good window for experimentation, okay, with new formulas 2024, because we still have it on the cusp, right? We can try to implement a new system here and see if it works. If it doesn't work, you can, when Pluto goes back into Capricorn in September, you can try again, okay? So this is kind of like the drawing board. This is a very sacred time of experimentation, trying things out. And yeah, there's a lot of calamity that can come because of that. But it is, I think, just somewhat guaranteed during this time to have like a hypothesis or to have new systems transitioning, okay? So there should be a lot of that happening at a lot of levels. And what I want to conclude the video on is this concept, rallying your strengths, all right? This is so important, and so it feels so good when you do it right, because I feel that it's going to relieve some really long-running pain and long-running frustration as we start to be able to identify, okay, this is a strength for me. I'm good at this. I have succeeded here. I have had an incredible story there. And then I also have this long-running momentum in the background that has also been supporting it. As you can like kind of pull these things together and rally yourself, give yourself confidence, boost yourself up on the combination of your victories, you will start to work with the Pluto and Aquarius energy in more of an appropriate way, because again, it's like a masculine air Pluto. It wants us to have victories in our lives. It wants us to remember what we've accomplished and to really pull from all of those things in our life that we've accomplished to start, or to prepare at least, to set out on a really new journey. Now that could be delayed for some people up until like 2026, where we have Saturn and Neptune preparing to hit Aries. The Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, alongside the fact that Pluto is still on the cusp and it will move back into 29 Capricorn one more time, this still speaks of finality. It still speaks of the end of very long-running structures. So it's like not totally in yet, but we can really start to see that oncoming. It's like if you can imagine yourself, I don't know, sailing from one continent to another. You've been out on the ocean for such a long time, and in the horizon, you can now see a city, or you can see a new landmass. So we know that that's coming. It's coming towards us, and we can start to kind of plan around that, but we're not quite there. That's kind of the energy of this time. So it's so empowering here to rally along our strengths to prepare for such an awesome new story coming on. But yes, everyone, do go and check out a free trial to my Patreon page. It is only for the rest of January that those will be available. I do weekly forecasts, and all of the 12 January readings are over there now as well. I'll link that below. Do subscribe to this YouTube channel, as it will be here, working in Pluto and Aquarius energies. So I think that it's a very Pluto and Aquarian type of effort. So hit the subscribe button below, hit the thumbs up, and comment and let me know what you thought of the video. Have a great transit, everyone. Bye.